Hi there, I am Terence from Crackcerts and I welcome you to the AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals Exam Practice Test 1. In this series of videos, we will discuss 38 latest exam questions on AZ-900 and we'll try to understand why an answer to a question is correct and more importantly, why other given options are incorrect in the context of the question. So I will take one question per video and try to explain the answers thoroughly so that you are able to learn the concept well and are able to successfully ace the official AZ-900 exam in the first attempt. So let's get started with this first question. So the question says that you create a resource group named RG1 in Azure Resource Manager, and you need to prevent the accidental deletion of the resources in RG1. So what should you use? And the options are deployments, properties, logs, or an export template. So basically, you have a resource group named RG1 and you might have some resources created within this resource group. For example, there might be a virtual machine in RG1, there can be some storage accounts, some virtual networks, and so on. And you need to make sure that none of these resources present in RG1 can be deleted accidentally by someone. So what should you use to achieve this? So the correct answer to this question is logs. So why logs? Because logs in Azure are meant to protect resources from accidental deletion or modification. And logs can be applied at different scopes. For example, you may apply logs at the subscription level, at a resource group level, or on a particular resource itself. So basically there are two types of logs in Azure. One is the delete log and the other is the read-only log. Now both these logs will prevent accidental deletion of resources within RG1. So you can choose to create and apply any of these logs on the resource group RG1 and it will not allow the deletion of resources within it. Now the primary difference between the read-only log and the delete log is that the read-only log prevents deletion of resources as well as prevents modification of resources within a resource group, while the delete log will prevent only the deletion of resources, but it will allow the modification of resources within RG1. So let's go and see this in action. So I go to the portal and I have created a resource group named RG1, and within this resource group I have all these different resources from storage accounts to virtual machines, a public IP address, a network security group, a virtual network, a disk, and so on. So I have all these resources created within the resource group RG1. Now before we go ahead and try to delete any of these resources or modify any of these resources, let us first go to the logs blade of the resource group and see if there are any logs that have already been created. So right now there are no logs that have been created on the resource group. This means that I am able to delete any of these resources, I am able to modify any of these resources. So let's go to the storage account, that is Crackcert storage 1. And before we actually try to delete this, let us first check whether this particular resource has any logs or not. So we go to the logs blade for this particular resource, and here we can see that there are no logs applied on this individual resource. So right now there are no logs that have been applied either on the resource group or on individual resources, which means I am able to delete a particular resource. So let's try to delete this storage account, and I copy this and confirm delete. So as you can see that the operation was successful because there was no logs applied on the individual resource or the resource group. So I'm able to successfully delete this particular resource, and it can be an accidental deletion as well. So to prevent any accidental deletion of resources within a resource group, we can create logs on that particular resource group. So I'm going to add a new log, and let's say I name this as prevent deletion. And as I told you that there are two types of logs, read only and delete. Read only log will prevent the deletion of resources as well as it will not allow any modification of resources, while the delete lock will prevent the deletion of resources, but it will allow modification of resource. So let us first try and create a delete lock and see what happens. So I click on OK. So I have now created a lock by the name of prevent deletion, and the lock type is delete and the scope is RG1. Now let's go back to the overview tab and let's go to the second storage account, which is crack cert storage 2. And before we attempt to delete this particular storage account, let us go to the locks blade over here and see that we have a lock that has been applied or inherited by this storage account. Now, because we created the lock at the scope resource group 1, so all the resources present within the resource group 1 will inherit this lock, which is of type delete. So let's go back to the overview tab and let's try to delete this storage account. So it says that storage 2 cannot be deleted because this resource or its parent has a delete lock. So it's not allowing me to delete this particular resource. But can we modify this particular resource? So let's say we go to tags and there is an existing tag with the value 4. So let's try to modify this by adding a new tag 1 with value 1. So this is kind of a modification that we're trying to do on this particular resource. So modification is allowed when there is a delete lock. Deletion is not allowed. As you can see that tag 1 value 1 was added, which means that the modification was allowed on this particular resource. Now let's go back to the resource group and let's go to locks again. And there is this delete lock that was created. Now let's try to change the lock type to read only. We don't need to create a new lock. We can just edit this lock and change the type to read only. Let's go back to overview and let's go back to the storage account again. Now I won't be able to delete it. So let's try it again, deleting it again. And it says it cannot be deleted because there is a lock applied there, right? But if I try to edit this now, and let's say I want to modify this and add a new tag to this, say tag to value 2, and save it. So it says fail to assign the tag. And the reason behind this is because in the read-only lock, you won't be able to delete the resource as well as you won't be able to modify the resource. So this is the concept of locks in Azure. Let's go back to the resource group and let's go back to our question. So locks is the correct answer. And now let's discuss one by one why all other options are incorrect. So the first option, which is deployments. Now deployments, if you go back to resource group 1 and if you go to deployments, so deployments basically are not related to protecting existing resources. It basically gives us the information of the deployments that have happened under this resource group. So for example, the storage accounts were created, a virtual machine was created. So it will give you the deployment name, the status of the deployment, whether it was successful or not, when it was last modified, the duration of the deployment and related events. So deployment has nothing to do with prevention of deletion of resources. It just gives you information about which resources were deployed and the related information. The other option that is incorrect is properties. So if you go back to resource group 1 and we go to properties, so the properties blade will give you the information about that particular resource. So here we can see the name of the resource, which is RG1, the location of the resource, the location ID, resource ID, subscription, etc. So it again does not have anything to do with the prevention of deletion of resources. It just gives you information about the properties of that particular resource. Now the last option that is incorrect is export template. So if you go back here and if you can see that export template is mentioned under the heading automation, and export templates are used to kind of export the resource configuration, your existing resource configuration as an ARM template. So they are great for replicating your infrastructure in other environments or for disaster recovery, but they don't prevent the deletion of resources. So basically export template will give you information about all the resources that are there, right? It gives you all this information in a JSON format. You can use this template to replicate your existing environment into some other environment as it is. So you don't have to manually create the virtual machines with the names that you've already used. You don't have to create the resources individually. You can just use this JSON file and you can create or replicate your existing infrastructure to a new environment. So there you have it. While all these elements play significant roles within Azure, they have their own specific purposes. It's the locks that gives you the ability to protect your resources from accidental deletion. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.